I have a love-hate thing with Tyler O'Neill. I mean, I've defended him for so many times. It's just like, just wait. He hasn't had enough at-bats in the majors yet. Just wait. And then he had that great season last year. This season, he's as frustrating, even to me, as he's ever been. And so I don't know what they can expect from him anymore going forward. And by going forward, I mean into 2023. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's really hard when you look at his record. I do not have a great history of projecting his final OPS because, as you said, it's been all over the place. In the long run, you expect that kind of guy to end up eventually having one of those seasons like right in the middle. Mike Zunino is another one of those guys who has been very up and down. But, that's not a guarantee you'll get that. And that makes it frustrating for a team like the Cardinals, which really are not really gamblers the way some teams are. They thrive on certainty, steadiness, solidity. So it's hard to have a corner outfielder who you're just not sure who he is.
That's exactly right. Dan, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, because I know some people will, analysts that I respect a lot, and I'd respect the heck out of you. Whether there's a secret sauce for being successful in the postseason, is it the bullpen? Is it home runs? Like, if you had to say what you think is particularly important, what would it be? As we try to figure if the Cardinals have some of those elements.
Well, relative to the regular season, high-end starting pitching, simply because you get a higher proportion of games and innings thrown from those pitchers in the postseason than you do in the regular season. So depth becomes less valuable. Your fifth starter matters a lot over 6 months, but your fifth starter doesn't matter as much, generally speaking, when you're only talking a couple weeks and individual games. We saw an example of this a few years ago when the Nationals won the World Series. They pretty much rode a few starting pitchers to the World Series, like one good relief pitcher at a time, and rode those guys hard and got a huge amount of innings from them, and it worked out for them. So I think that it's not like a cliche of like pitching always beats hitting. It's just you get to use your starting pitchers and your top-end starting pitchers more in the playoff formats that we have.
And I'm really, one thing that and I'll get off the Cardinals after this, although I'm going to ask you about the MVP. I'm really looking forward to Ali Marmol's first postseason. He's been an impressive manager, and he's really sort of fast-forwarded the Cardinals into some more modernized thinking about tactics, lineup construction, bullpen usage. I mean, he's really made a good impression, and he's creative, and he's also bold. He's not afraid what people think. I wonder what he's got in store, because he's dropping hints. Derek Gould wrote a great piece today at the Post-Dispatch STL today about how unusual compared to the norm Marmol may get with his handling his pitching staff this fall. Starting pitchers relieving, things like that. So have you been impressed by his work so far this season?
I think he's done a solid job, because you look at the team, they've had to patch up the starting rotation kind of on the fly over the course of the season. If you asked who you'd want the top five to be at the start of the season and now, it'd be a very different group. I mean, you wouldn't even have, obviously, Montgomery or Quintana, but he's had to kind of deal with that. And also, the outfield has been a lot thinner than in recent years. I don't think the secondary talent, once you get past, say, Brendan Donovan and Juan Yepez, has really been great. So it's been a juggling act to try to get enough offense to win games. And the Cardinals, I mean, they're going to finish probably third in the league in runs scored, which is pretty impressive for some of the holes they've had to juggle this year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Before I forget, I want you all to follow. He's a great follow on Twitter, Dan Szymborski. It's at D, and I'm going to go slowly and spell that last name for you. So it's at D and then SZYMBORSKI. No excuses. I went slow. You should remember that now. Do you have? Could you give us a kind of snapshot view of the Philadelphia Phillies? I assume the Cardinals are going to be playing them in the first round. How good are they? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What should Cardinals fans worry about?
Well, you look at the starting pitching. You have Nola and Wheeler, and that's a pretty scary 1-2. Yeah, they have Ranger Suarez, who's been solid, but Nola has been one of the best pitchers in baseball since the start of May. Got off to a little slow start, but he's really been cruising, and he's not a power pitcher. You have to be patient with Nola. He's not going to overpower you, but he will throw any pitch on any count. So that's very tricky. The weakness of the Phillies is their outfield defense is, to be generous, indifferent. So there is a benefit to putting a lot of balls in play against them. I mean, they didn't, in fairness, they did not go into the season expecting to play both Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos in the outfield at the same time. Bryce Harper was supposed to be in one of those positions in right field, most likely, but injuries kind of changed those plans. So they are weak out there. If you have guys who have some gap power, I think you can, to an extent, eke out a few extra runs here and there against the Phillies. I think it's a good team, and it's a better constructed team than it's been in recent years, where they've just kind of hovered around 500. The bullpen, they do have some injuries, so even though the pen's generally been better this year, they have struggled recently, so you can't get to them late in games. So some of those tactical matchups at the end of the game are more important. So I think you do want to make sure to have an extra couple bats on the bench if possible, I think.
I want to direct everyone to go to fangraphs.com. Listen, I'm a member, by the way, and it's because I'm investing in a site that I love, but also one that I need. Because a lot of the stuff that I write and talk about here on the show, a lot of it is data-driven. And the stuff that I just gave you all on Pujols, I was able to do by using Fangraphs and their search engine for statistics. I'm very happy to pay a yearly fee, which is very reasonable, to support all this great work at Fangraphs. And if you haven't gone to Fangraphs, I encourage you to do it. It's a wonderland of stats and analysis and fun things, and you can depth charts. I mean, you name it. And all that's free, but you get a better viewing experience if you become a member. And you also know by becoming a member that you are helping to grow and sustain and grow an invaluable site for baseball fans and hated sports media like me. So there's my pitch. I feel like one of those PBS, you know how they have their fundraising drives? I think I could get, when they throw it to the local studio, I think I could actually get a gig doing that. So anyway.
We need like a gift to give out. Now
I know.
The signed folder from the Fangraphs writers.
I could get Dan McLaughlin to sign a bunch of stuff. So yeah, we could do that. I know. And then specifically with my friend Dan Szymborski, I want you to go to Fangraphs and read a piece he did on Nolan Arenado and the opt-out clause. And Dan, I want people to read it because then they can absorb it. But what's your general feeling about this opt-out clause? And we all think he's going to stay, but maybe there'll be an adjustment. I mean, where do you come in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to stay too. I just wanted to kind of get around the numbers of it, like what is logical, what his incentives are. And I think one of the problems of him opting out is he does have a solid contract that pays him around market value from what he'd expect, because he is against the reality that teams do not like spending a ton of money on players who are going to be 32. He's not a young player anymore, and teams are aware of this in a way that they weren't really aware of, say, 25 years ago. Those huge $300 million contracts are usually guys who were 25, 26, who are hitting free agency very early. Arenado's not in that position. So I think there's a chance he could ring out a little more in free agency, but then you have the whole, you're having to change teams, cities, contract negotiations. Those things can get ugly sometimes. If he's in a place that he's comfortable with, then there's not a great jackpot at the end of the rainbow to make him want to move on. He's not going to get a $300 million contract. There's just no chance of that. So I suspect that the incentives tend to lean towards him staying in St. Louis. Maybe they'll throw him a bone. Maybe they'll add another year at the end or change the deferred money in some way. I don't know. But I expect him to be in St. Louis next year. I think that's the general feeling from people who are closer to him.
I wanted to ask you this question. It's a time of year where everyone's gauging the award races, and my friend Jason Stark, I was reading his piece about it, and he was like, "Oh man, this National League MVP thing is close. It's really, really close." I'm not putting Jason down at all. I'm really not. He has reasons to say that. I was just a little surprised that he said that it was as close as he thinks it is. And maybe I'm being a little bit of a homer, but I'm looking at Goldschmidt, and yes, he's been quiet for a while now down the stretch, but his overall year is pretty huge. I'd be surprised if he doesn't win it. What about you?
I think he's actually come back to the pack a bit in the last month. Now, other players have slumped too, but I think kind of that perception is it has dropped off a little. I think he's still the favorite, but you can make a non-crazy case, I think, for 7 hitters in the NL. I would probably personally put Arenado first. I think I'm definitely in the minority of this. I don't have an MVP vote this year, just Rookie of the Year, so I'm not revealing anything about my ballot, but I think Goldschmidt will win. I think Machado is tough competition because you look at the Padres, who have had a whole season without Tatis, and plus more without Tatis next year. And Machado having a huge season has been pretty big for that team because the offense, they had some real slow starters, and he kind of almost pushed that offense single-handedly as much as one player can do when you look at April and May. Freeman's been terrific. Lindor's been terrific. Mookie Betts has been terrific. And he hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but Real Muto is having a terrific season.
I agree.
Some of the sabermetric numbers, he's a little behind, but he's also a catcher. There's a lot of defensive responsibility there. He's probably the fastest catcher that is around. I don't know if everyone's been noticing, but he only recently got caught stealing for the first time this year. He's stolen 21 to 22 bases, and he's a 31-year-old catcher.
Yeah, I mean, as you and I sit here and have this conversation, my friend Dan Szymborski of Fangraphs, and again, go to fangraphs.com, as you know, before play today, you know, there's a 3-way tie for the Fangraphs version of wins above replacement in the National League. Arenado, Goldschmidt, Machado all have 7.2 wins above replacement. I mean, that's a pretty good race right there. But Goldie, like in all the categories, not just the counting stats, but the rate stats too, I mean, he shows up very, very well, even though he has been quiet for a while, too quiet, from the power standpoint. I mean, he's still getting on base. He's still getting his hits. But as I've talked about since August the 26th, Andrew Kisner has more home runs than Paul Goldschmidt. That's probably not good.
Yeah, it's not ideal. He's definitely fallen back in the home run. He was only a few behind Schwarber a month ago when I was doing some Triple Crown projections. Now he's 11 behind Schwarber. That's quite a difference.
Dan Szymborski, what do you make of Albert Pujols? I mean, this stuff is actually insane. Since the beginning of August, he's only got 2 fewer home runs than Aaron Judge, and he's out slugging him by a little bit. I mean, this is just nuts. Age 42, he's not wearing down. He's actually gotten better.
Yeah, it's weird. You see, for the first time, it feels like he should come back for another year. Obviously, he's not going to at this point. That would kind of ruin the whole farewell season. But this has been his best season really since 2010, which is kind of odd.
It is.
I mean, there was always a possibility he'd hit more home runs, but he's been much better overall than he's been in years. It was hard to justify them continuing to play him as much as they did in Los Angeles because, let's be honest, 2018, 2019, 2020, he wasn't really that good. And not just for DH, he wasn't really hitting all that well for anyone all around. But this year, he's thrived. It's hard to explain. I think it's been probably helpful that he's not expected to play the field as much. Maybe that has some kind of benefit because the Dodgers still used him a lot at first base. The Angels generally did when they had the opportunity. But no, it's one of the great farewell seasons, and it's a great farewell season that was kind of unexpected. And it's nice to see him pass these thresholds playing well. You don't want to see someone limp across 700. And while there have been questions about Pujols, say 600, 650, he's been really, really good this year.
No doubt about it. I mean, you know, start about July 10th, it's just been pretty relentless. And he's even hitting right-handed pitching now, hitting it very well, you know, not just kind of while he's holding his own. I mean, 7 of his last 9 home runs have been against right-handed pitching, and with a big fat slugging percentage. So, it's been such an interesting season. And as a fan, I'm going to be sad when it's over because it's just been so enjoyable watching this show that he puts on every night. You know, it's like if you would have told me, my friend Dan Szymborski, that before the year Pujols would, no problem, he'll sail past A-Rod and he'll get into the 700 home run club, and no problem, he'll clear it easily. And oh yeah, by the way, he'll kind of nudge the Babe aside, and you know, the all-time RBI leaderboard. I would have just said, man, I don't know what, quit sniffing glue or whatever it is that you're doing to yourself. So it's really just kind of nuts. Hey, one more thing for you as we look ahead. I'm jumping the gun, but you know, the Milwaukee Brewers, you know, clearly had a disappointing season. They thought they were going to have a great season, and I thought they were going to be excellent, and they weren't. And where do they go from here, in your opinion? Like, you know, David Stearns hasn't, you know, they've made the playoffs 4 years in a row, and this was kind of this one was pretty much of a crusher to them. Where do they go from here in terms of getting better for next year?
I do think they need to invest a little more in their team. They were very unaggressive about upgrading the offense coming into the season. I thought Andrew McCutchen was an extremely underwhelming addition to a team that did need an extra bat. I think they need to kind of decide what they're going to do with guys like Keston Hiura, who has played well, but for some reason he's barely getting more playing time than last year when he hit like not at all. So that's a confusing thing. They do need probably to get some certainty on extending Corbin Burns and Brennan Woodruff, because those days where they are going to hit free agency are slowly approaching. I think it's a very volatile team. I think the Brewers were more likely to win 100 games than the Cardinals were, but I think the Brewers were also more likely to win only 70 games than the Cardinals were. There's just more uncertainty with the Brewers than the Cardinals. I had them very close in the preseason projections.
Sure.
But the Brewers,
that made sense.
Yeah. So I do think they do have some big questions to deal with this year.
How much do you like Wilson Contreras? A lot of Cardinals fans think that the Cardinals should make a run at him, not just to damage the Cubs, but it's just that there's going to be a void at catcher, and John Mozeliak's always going in the media saying, you know, that's the one thing like I think about every day. I think about it at night. What are we going to do for catcher next year? That's a good question, but is Contreras, in your opinion, worth a significant investment? And I don't know how to define significant investment, but you get where I'm coming from, where he would have term and he would have a fairly high average annual value.
I think that he is, simply because no one's going to spend $200 million on him. So it's not like you're going to have to give him a possibly franchise crippling contract. You look at Yasmani Grandal, JT Realmuto. They don't have massive, huge contracts. Contreras probably won't even command what Realmuto did. He's a little older, and his record isn't quite as solid as Realmuto's. But I love Contreras as a starter. I think you could probably get him for 4 years, $80 million. I don't think that's an unreasonable commitment. Obviously, that's not the projection written in stone since I'm doing this off the cuff, but he's a solid player. He's very steady, and that kind of thing I think does appeal to the Cardinals, as I've talked about before and frequently, that they do like guys who are steady, even if they're not necessarily going to be an MVP, but that Contreras is healthy, will be at least a decent player.
Dan Szymborski, I hope I didn't keep you too long, but I just enjoy just sort of moving around and asking you about a bunch of things. And thanks, as always, for your great work at fangraphs.com, and also just having a chance to chat with you every now and then. And I should do it more often, but I appreciate your time today. Very generous.
I know. We always have fun, Bert. I told you, anytime you want to clear the schedule for me, I'm totally down.
No, well, don't be saying that. You'll regret it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan. That's our really good friend from way back, Dan Szymborski, and respect that guy so much. I like his endorsement of Wilson Contreras, and I tell you what, I'm going to throw one thing in here, and then I will. Let me find it because I'm actually on Fangraphs, so I have to find the number. Mm-hmm. Pujols this year, right? They signed him for $2.5 million. And if you go by his performance up to this point, he has provided value that if a team were to sign him to a one-year deal based on what he did, if you could see into the future, okay, this is what he'll do, what kind of money is that one season worth? It's $14 million, according to Fangraphs, their value metric. So they invested $2.5 million in Pujols, and they got $14 million worth of performance value. And it would be even higher, but he obviously doesn't get any defense-related points, so to speak. And certainly not base running. So that's basically built just on offense. So really, and I think if anything, he's undervalued. By the way, he has not been valued this high since his 2014 season with the Angels. But anyway, my point being, you got Molina coming off the books. You may have Wainwright coming off the books. You're going to have Pujols coming off the books. You may have to adjust Arenado's contract a little bit. And I know there's some other contracts there, whatever. This was such an incredibly cheap contract for Pujols, which a club received enormous value, and not just value on the field. Think about all the extra tickets sold. Think about all the concession sales because of that. Think about the merch. Just think about all these promotions. I mean, Pujols has, and I know Molina too, but I think it's Pujols more than anybody, quite frankly, has generated so much revenue for that club. I'm just saying it in advance, and everyone knows the respect I have for DeWitt and Mo. I'd never hesitate to question them or criticize them, but their track record and this level of consistency, especially since 2000, is virtually unmatched. I mean, only the Dodgers and Yankees can kind of hang with the Cardinals in that regard. Regular season success, number of times making the postseason, number of games won in the postseason, that type of thing. The Cardinals are an amazingly successful franchise on a consistent basis. However, when they have a need, and I was the one saying, no, you don't overpay for 2 years of Juan Soto. You don't do it. But I'm telling you, this offseason, with the benefits that they've received financially and otherwise from Pujols, and also clearing some salaries off the books, there is no excuse, none, if they go cheap this winter or if they go in the bargain bin again. There's just nothing there to defend that. I'm going to just say it right now. I know we're not quite to the offseason, but if you need a catcher, and John Mozeliak has said, and I know you've seen this or heard this, and I know our listeners have, John Mozeliak has said repeatedly the number one thing he keeps him awake at night, he's wondering who's going to be their catcher. Where do you get your catcher? Well, he's about a 5-hour drive north is where you get your catcher. And the Cubs didn't trade him, and the Cubs actually didn't offer him much of a contract, at least to what him and his agent wanted. There's your catcher right there. So are we going to go bargain hunting again? Are we going to drag somebody in here who's like 39 and can like share the load with Andrew Kisner? Is that what this is going to become? That's actually an insult to Yadier Molina as well. I mean, when you go from that standard and you're going to go, if you go cheap now to find his replacement, that's actually insulting to him. That insults his legacy. So they need to do the best that they can for a catcher. And I'm not saying Contreras is the only one. I know Cardinals fans are all in love with the dude out in Oakland. I don't know if he's available and what the cost would be. But he's good too. There's going to be a few guys you can get if you're willing to pay the price. Either money, which also means giving up a draft pick, or if you're willing to trade some of your prospects. The only thing is trading prospects, even though the Cardinals did fine this year, makes me nervous. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. You know how we're talking about, well, we don't know who's going to play the outfield. We don't know who's going to do this. I don't know who's going to take over in center if Carlson gets hurt. Ben DeLuzio's good defensively, but come on now. Connor Capel has been just killing it with Oakland. And here we go again.
Oh, no.
And I'm consistent with this. I'm not being a phony. I said it at the time. He looks really good. He knows what he's doing. The kid's got the aptitude to play. He's got a good hitting approach. He's got plate discipline. He's got some pop. And it's just like, here they go again. They just let another outfielder walk out the door who does better when he reaches his next destination. What is wrong with these people? Seriously. I don't get it.
I'm there with you because I know the offseason is going to be, well, we kind of like Tyler. We think he's going to be
more of that.
Yeah, right? I don't want that anymore. And, oh, goodness.
And, Carlson has moved into the HC club as well.
Yeah.
The HC club standing for head case. And it may seem harsh to some people, but I call it as I see it, man. Yeah, he's and Capel hasn't played. They've put him just to finish this point.
Yeah,
they've put him down in the minors, the A's I'm talking about, but they really wanted him, and they're pretty smart about finding excellent low-cost alternatives. So let me see if I can find this real quick. Well, they don't. One thing about Fangraphs, they don't have it broken down. So I'll come back and give you the numbers. But he's off to a pretty good start. In fact, even if you add the Cardinals numbers to this, and again, we're only talking about 60 plate appearances, but if you even combine his Cardinal stats and his Oakland stats, he's hitting .319, he's got a .377 on-base percentage, and he's got a .553 slug. Oh, no, the Cardinals don't need that. No. Even though he impressed them, and they said that he did, when he got a look-see this year, when they were down because of injuries to the usual suspects. No, yeah, but just let him walk. It's okay. It's just ridiculous.
Bernie, where are we going to play these other guys we got?
Just absolutely
not sure
ridiculous. It's the nightmare that never ends.
It really is.
It's just ridiculous. I've never seen like an organization that I can remember, baseball or any other sport, where they have a blind spot that just goes on for year after year after year after year after year. It's just remarkable. In a way, you have to stand back and admire it because it's kind of impossible to be this bad at evaluating the present and the future of your outfield at the major league level. It's really quite an achievement, but in the wrong way.
I know we've discussed this player before and reasons why, but today I was watching the Yankee game, and they were playing the Rangers. Dallas Garcia hit his 27th home run and his 100th RBI today.
He does that. He also strikes out a ton.
He does.
But so does Gorman and so does O'Neill. So, no, he's another one. But I don't
Everybody
give
had
them,
a chance at him, but it still went to the point of he came through here at one point.
Yeah, I don't give them hell for that because not only did every other team have a chance to claim him, and it didn't happen right away, but the Rangers also designated him for assignment once they had him.
Yes.
And they were lucky because they had some injuries, and he was still on the streets, and they picked him up again. So I would say pretty much every team in baseball was off on him. But the Cardinals did have him in their system, and they should have known better than other teams because they were more familiar with what he does. And by the way, I'm gonna revise what I said. Look, his strikeout rate is high, but it's not ridiculous. It's like 28%. You would prefer more. He doesn't get on base. That's another thing about him. I mean, his on base percentage every year is below 300. That's not good. And he does slug and he does hit home runs. I don't know how many of the home runs are the result of that ballpark. I can do some research on that. But yeah, if people want to add him to the list, they can. I just think that there's a caveat that gets attached to it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yes.
So,
but to their point, there's just so many guys that have come through. You went, what's going on around here?
I don't know, man. I don't know. And it just makes me wonder how many more screw-ups will there be in the outfield as far as misjudgments, if that's the term, right?
Yep.
Let's take a timeout. When we return, I want to get back to something we asked Dan Szymborski about, which is Paul Goldschmidt. Is he in danger of losing the MVP? I don't think he should be. But your old Uncle Bernie warned you about 2 weeks ago and said, the writers, the voters are bored. This Goldschmidt MVP runaway leader, he's got it. Everybody quit worrying about it. He's the MVP. I tell you something about voters because I was a voter and will be a voter again, not in any of these awards, but like for the Hall of Fame coming up, they get bored when something's so obvious. And if a guy slows down, if a guy his numbers start to fall off, they get bored and they start shopping for other candidates. That's exactly what's happening here. I don't see how it would be fair to deny him the MVP. But I also will say, when you have it, you all but have it in your trophy case, and you are out-homered by Andrew Kisner since August the 26th, you're leaving the door open, fairly or unfairly.